All right, so the next topic that we'll tackle here is CSS transforms. So transform is actually a property that CSS comes with that's really, really powerful. It's a little bit complicated, potentially intimidating, so we're going to break it down. And the first thing we should discuss is, what does it actually do? So the official definition, or the explanation, is that transform lets you manipulate the coordinate space of the CSS visual formatting model. So I translated this a bit into something a bit more understandable, hopefully. This is what I got. Transform lets you move, warp, rotate, and scale elements. So it allows us to take elements, let's say a div, and it's at a certain place on our page. I can spin it around. I can move it X pixels to the right or down. I can do things like scaling it up, shrinking it down, warping it according to 3D perspective, all different things that I can do. And when we use this in conjunction with what we're going to learn about CSS transitions and keyframes, we can then animate them. So what I'm going to show you now isn't really animating. I'm going to show you how to move things, how to warp them, how to skew them and rotate, but it's not going to be graceful. It's not going to be animated. So if we rotate something, it's going to rotate immediately. Our next step will then be learning how to slow it down, how to set the timing function of it, all of that. So for now, we're going to start by taking a look at the documentation, which is actually a bit overwhelming. If we look at the official transform syntax, I copied it over here, there are so many possible variations for this. It's a bit different than other properties, like, background color. You pass it a color. Maybe it's an RGB color, maybe it's RGBA, it might be hexadecimal, it might be a named color. And that's kind of a lot of variation for most CSS properties. But transform has, 24 or more possible functions that we pass in. If we go to the docs here, I'm on MDN. I scroll down to syntax. You can see that the syntax looks like this: transform : just like any other property, followed by a function. So in this case, translate, scale, rotate, skew, skew X, skew Y, matrix, translate 3D, scale, there's tons of them. I won't go over all of them. And we're not going to talk about all of them in this section either. I'm just going to point out a few of them, basically because they're commonly used in animations. And those three that we're going to talk about up front are translating, translate X, translate Y, and then we'll talk about scaling, and scale X and scale Y, and then rotation. And those three functions put together cover most of the bases for animations. Maybe you'll need to do something with a 3D animation or a false 3D or skew something at some point. But usually, at least in my experience, most UI animations are done by rotating, by translating, moving something essentially, and scaling it. So without further ado, let's end this video. I'll see you in the next video where we start typing some code. We talk about our first transform.